Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to World War II In Depth. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about skill-based matchmaking. Yes, at long last, that video is finally ready to go. The links to the study that I'm going to be talking about are in the description below. It's going to be the first and second link, with the first one probably being Google Drive and the second one being like a Dropbox mirror backup. Just links to the raw data so you can take at it, you can analyze it, you can draw your own conclusions. You could probably do a better job than me since my stat skills are very, very rusty at the moment. And later in the video, we're also going to be hearing from Sledgehammer Games because it is their game, and I did talk to Michael Condrey, and he's got his own thoughts and quotes on skill-based matchmaking, so we'll be sharing that info as well. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the $1,000 challenge, skill-based matchmaking is kind of the boogeyman in Call of Duty World War II or Call of Duty games for the last 3 or 4 years, ever since Advanced Warfare. Essentially, it is the belief that you are matched primarily or almost exclusively based on skill, and the better player you are, the higher stats you have. The community usually fixates on kill-death ratio. The higher kill-death ratio, better, more talented enemies you will match against. I was the only person to ever really do any testing or studies on it back in Advanced Warfare, and what I found was that there was no evidence of skill-based matchmaking, at least not very convincing evidence. So I took the opinion that it's not real. The community and I disagree greatly on that, so for this game I put out a $1,000 challenge to prove skill-based matchmaking is real as kind of a put up or shut up for the community. It was kind of hopefully going to end all of it. I never expected anybody to sit down and do any data science or do a real study, and I most certainly did not expect the results that I got today. However, a student stepped up and did a fantastic study. His name is Robert Rose. He provided great data that we're going to be going over later. Got a couple of interesting parts about his data. So being the only person that really did a study and really provided hardcore data, he got the $1,000 prize. Everything that we're going to talk about from this point forward is based solely on Robert's study, so get ready for that, and we'll hear from Sledgehammer and some other sources later on in the video. Based on that study, it would appear that Call of Duty World War II and maybe other Call of Duty games have some kind of hidden MMR system, some sort of rating that we can't really see, at least not visually to the player, that it matches people based on. One thing that I want to be super clear about is that it does not have any correlation with kill-death ratio, score per minute, and is super definitely not based on level, on prestiges, on how high a prestige or Grandmaster or Master prestige you are. That doesn't seem to matter. Yes, there is a protection bracket. If you have a truly new account and you're a truly new player, your first couple games will be with lower level players, but once you're breaking out of like level 10 or 12, you're done with that permanently, and there is pretty much no skill matching on level or kill death ratio. However, in Robert's study, we did find a stronger matching on win-loss ratio. It's a much better predictor of lobby difficulty, or at least a much better predictor on who you're going to get matched on. It seems that the higher your win-loss ratio, the more likely you are to match with other people that also have high win-loss ratios. If you're looking at the study right now, you may notice that instead of ratios, we have percentages. That's because the Call of Duty API, which we relied on to get the data, reports this as percentages. So basically, a higher win-loss ratio should mean more challenging lobbies, which is most certainly not what I was expecting, given that previous data I had in Advanced Warfare showed basically no correlation there. But it would make sense that if there is some sort of hidden skill rating, then just stat padding your score per minute or KDR wouldn't be the best way. It would have some sort of ELO system to it, so the more you win, the harder your lobbies should get. As a side effect, if you have a really high win-loss ratio, it doesn't seem to be able to find lobbies with similar win-loss ratios easily because you're too far out on the bell curve. And when you do get them, you tend to get higher KDR or score per minute lobbies kind of to compensate. You can see this most clearly in Exclusive Ace's data, which he provided because I think he is the most skilled player that we studied, probably on average. And you can see that in his lobbies, his win-loss ratio is really high. He doesn't match very well with other people that have similar win-loss ratios, but the difficulty of his enemies of all other stats have gone up. On top of this, Robert believes that connection is not an important variable in matchmaking because in his studies on his account, he got matched in China, and because there wasn't a clear trend in connection or trace route or exactly what server he was being put on, there was no correlation there. It was just kind of all over the place. And since there weren't a lot of correlations on connection, but quite a few on win-loss ratio, then the conclusion was that win-loss ratio, or skill in that matter, is a very important variable in matchmaking, whereas connection really isn't. This is one place where I really disagree with Robert. I think it's because maybe he was testing on PC, and PC has strange data, and Exclusive Ace's data basically showed the opposite. He always got matched in the US or in North America, since he lives in Canada. And what's most likely is that COD games are just very generous with what they consider acceptable ping. Call of Duty games pride themselves on super fast matchmaking and queue times. When you hit find a match, it usually finds you a match in 15 seconds or less, if not 5 seconds. At least that's my experience with it. In order to do this, a lot of variables need to be kind of loose, and what I would suspect is that it picks a wide band of connections and a wide band of servers that you can acceptably connect to, and just puts you in super fast. So you probably wouldn't see a really strong correlation with connection. There is one anecdotal story to support this evidence from Robert. I was talking to somebody recently. It was a pro player who I hold in very high regard, and I wouldn't even share this story on an in-depth if it weren't for the highness of the regard in which I hold this person. But they said that when World War II first came out, they played a lot of hardpoint, you know, because that's their pro and that's kind of what they want to practice and work on. And they noticed that after smashing a whole bunch of lobbies, they started getting matched against more difficult enemies, and then finally against other pro players. He was consistently matching against other professional Call of Duty players, even outside of regions which they were supposed to be in. North America, we're talking here, not out of region like North America to Australia or whatever. But there were people that lived nowhere near him, on the other coast, as a matter of fact, that he was still matching with very consistently in hardpoint along with other pro players. So his suspicion was that there was some sort of elo going on, or some sort of thing that he couldn't control that was forcing him to get harder lobbies. So based on Robert's study, it would seem like Call of Duty matchmaking roughly works like this. You will try to find an acceptable ping and region match, some server somewhere. It's going to scan a whole ton of people really quick and pull a whole bunch of people that are within some tolerance of ping and region, and I would expect that to be very generous. I would expect this for it to really not care if you have a 25 millisecond server or a 75 millisecond server. They're both more or less equal in this. They're all acceptable. Then within this range of servers and this massive pool of players, it picks a best skill match based on some kind of hidden MMR variable that we're not really able to see, but the most important part of that MMR variable is definitely going to be your win-loss ratio, and then it does lobby balancing. And my favorite part of this study, the most concrete part of it by far, is the lobby balancing. Even if the skill-based matchmaking is more challenging, which we'll talk about later because Condry kind of takes a big dump on my data, the lobby balancing data is very clear and very concrete. As far as I can tell, it's just a simple averaging algorithm. When you get put with your 12 players, or you'll be 1 and they'll be 11, it does just a very straightforward averaging and lobby balance to try to get each team close to equal stats. So that if you average 6 players on each team, they're roughly going to have the same win-loss, the same score per minute, and the same kill-death ratio within some tolerances as quickly as possible without breaking up parties. And that's a very sensible, straightforward thing. If you get 12 players, you want to kind of try and balance the teams as much as you can so that it doesn't get too one-sided and people don't get stomped. Because of this, gods, or really high-level players, are ultimately going to end up being pulled apart in order to make the weights and averages much easier to do. So you're not likely to get matched with super awesome teammates, or it's not likely you're going to get like 4 awesome people on one team and then 6 really terrible people on the other. It's going to be 2 and 2 and then 3 and 3. It's just going to kind of break them apart like that, most likely. This system, however, will greatly punish players who don't try or rage quit a lot, especially if it's matching based more primarily on win-loss ratio. If you sandbag, if you quit out of games, if you throw games, if you're only doing challenges, if you just try to pad your stats a whole bunch and don't really care about objectives or winning whatsoever, and you ultimately lose but with fantastic stats, what's going to end up happening is when you get matched in, you'll be in a lower win-loss ratio bracket, but your stats will be really high. So in order to balance the lobbies, you're going to get really bad teammates. So if you sandbag a lot, it's way more likely that you get terrible, terrible teammates. That for me was the most clear and straightforward thing of this entire study, which unfortunately ended up getting very muddy. And this is the point where things start spiraling out of control for me personally. The entire reason I did this project was to try to get the community to think scientifically instead of my feels, because people use their feels to tell about UFO abductions, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, ionic power bracelets, healing crystals, and stuff like that. But science doesn't work based on feels, and you can't feel skill-based matchmaking exactly. We needed to prove it, and I thought nobody would do it. Well, somebody did it, and it ultimately attracted way more attention my way than what I had anticipated. When I went to CWL Dallas, everywhere I went all day, they were like, "Hey Drift, how's that skill-based matchmaking video? Hey Drifter, how's skill-based matchmaking going? Oh, you want to do an interview with Dexterdo? Let's talk about skill-based matchmaking." Just all day, all weekend, everybody wanted to know about it, all in my timelines, even people on Reddit speculating all the time. And I really kind of didn't want it to be this big because the whole topic just kind of irritates me in general. But then it got weirder. While I was at CWL Dallas, my phone buzzes and I look down and it's bzz, bzz. In my inbox, there's somebody claiming to work at Activision, and they just wanted to talk to me about how matchmaking works, and they shared a whole bunch of information which I know absolutely should not have been shared and should be proprietary. And I'm not going to be talking about that in this video in any specific detail, because Activision is a giant multi-billion-dollar company with an army of lawyers that probably doesn't want YouTubers blabbing off about anything private. Also, it attracts a lot of unwanted negative attention my way. What did happen, though, is about half, maybe a little more than half of what the leaker said lined up with what I was already studying. So I was like, awesome, yes, inside data. This is great. I can go ahead and kind of skip the verification phase. I don't have to grind out all those numbers. I don't have to do that. And then it occurred to me, oh God, this is getting way, way beyond me if we're dealing with leaks and legal stuff and trying to like snoop and verify people's background or whatever. Thankfully, I did run into Michael Condrey while I was at CWL Dallas, so I decided to talk to him about it. Or, well, it was all over Twitter and it was the hot topic of the day, minus the event, so it took all of about 30 seconds to end up at that topic. And I'm going to include in this video what Michael has to say about it, because he is a person that I trust, and I know the 3 out of 1,000 meme, I know the community jokes, I know people have weird conspiracies about me getting paid by Activision, or me being super gullible, and all kinds of silly things like that, but Michael Condrey has not lied to me in the 3 and some change years that I've known him. Even day one, I meet him under less than ideal circumstances, having leaked his game early, and he was still very cordial and straightforward and not lying, so I don't have a reason to distrust him. So let's just jump straight into it. He assured me 100 times over that skill-based matchmaking is just not in Call of Duty World War II at all. No matter how many different kind of ways I wanted to ask the question, no matter what I talk about this thing and that thing and what if and blah blah blah, the answer is pretty much no, 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 it's not in the game. And while we were talking, he personally said that he checked on the code to make sure it wasn't there. Like, he literally looked at the matchmaking code to make sure that skill-based matchmaking is not in the game at all. So that was very relieving. And I'm like, that's great, you know, Michael, we're talking about all this stuff, and that's great, but my data says something different, and so does this leaker person saying something different as well. He was very adamant that the leak I got was fake, or it was a person that didn't know what they were talking about, and it didn't go very far on that end. When talking about data, we mostly talked about sample size problems and API problems. So one of the big issues I had is that I studied like a handful of players over a handful of matches each, and that is a really small sample size. We tried to get different players and we tried to make it as big as possible, but when you're doing manual data entry, it just takes a really stupid amount of time. And you know, if you want to study a gigantic population, you need a pretty big sample size. So I went and did the formula to find the proper sample size to get a 95% confidence accuracy answer, and I needed to sample about 25,000 players. I've got like 10 or 15 players in this study, if that. So I'm way small in the sample size, which was something we talked about, and he mentioned that, like, yeah, your data really might say skill-based matchmaking is real, but if you had a sample size of more than 0.1% of what you're supposed to have, it would probably average out in the long run and you wouldn't see these kind of anomalies. So yeah, that's a very real problem with what we were working on. Another thing is that we're just pulling data at home and using an API that is far from perfect. I'm at home, I have a NetDuma router, I have all like consumer grade hardware and stuff. Same thing with Robert, out of a university, but nothing commercial, nothing industrial. It's not a private API. It's just the Call of Duty website punching in names, doing manual data entry. And the public API is far from perfect. That website has quite a few bugs. It enters data a week, sometimes 2 weeks late. Some people are missing completely from it. Some of the data is clearly bugged or in error. So there are flaws there. And if you look at the study where we have blanks, that's not stuff that we didn't look up. It's that the API was giving me screwball answers. That doesn't mean all the answers are perfect for the people whose data looked normal either, so that's a problem as well. He briefly considered making his own challenge in response to mine, a different amount of money and different sort of guidelines for how to prove it. I'm not going to spoil his thing, but the one quote I'm going to put in here is, he said, "We've been adamant from day one that skill-based matchmaking is not in the game, and I've checked to make sure that is true because I know the community is really fixated on this. I wanted to make sure that if it came time to prove it, put up or shut up, that the facts are 100% on the side of Sledge." Michael Condrey. So yeah, at the end of all of this, my honest feeling is that I just don't care about skill-based matchmaking anymore. This has been way, way, way too much trouble. I ended up paying out $1,000 for a study that is, at the end of the day, it's the best study that we've ever had on skill-based matchmaking, even though it's small and done at home and kind of janky in some ways, but it's still the best we've ever had. I end up $1,000 poorer, and my advancement toward an answer is not any more clear because I've got a study that, yes, has flaws, says skill-based matchmaking is real. Then I've got a person giving me leaks saying that, well, some of that is real. And then I've got Michael Condrey, who's a person that I trust, saying none of that is real. And I'm sitting here with 3 different versions of the same answer, none of which really line up very well with each other. A whole community expecting answers, and I don't even want to discuss the leaker stuff because I know that's just a giant can of legal worms with Activision. And this is just way above my pay grade. This is way more trouble than it's worth. It's been mega problematic and stressful for me, and I just don't care about skill-based matchmaking anymore. I don't care if it's real. I don't care if it's not real. I don't care if it overrides connection entirely and matches me just based on my amount of headshots or whatever in the hell kind of weird theory you want. I honestly don't believe that making this video 1,000 videos or doing a 25,000 player study would change the community's mind at all, because they're completely dead set on believing one thing or another, regardless of what evidence says or what studio heads and companies make, which are like legal statements binding to stockholders and false investment, whatever, with the FTC. It just doesn't matter. It's crazy. It's nonsensical to me. It drives me up a wall. I mean, there's people deep in conspiracies on this. They think that, I've had people tell me that if they contact Activision support and complain about skill-based matchmaking, their next 5 or 6 games are easier, so that the people working support have like little levers, I guess, that can turn skill-based matchmaking on or off for certain accounts, or that based on this video, Sledgehammer is going to change the whole matching algorithm to disprove me, or that Activision is paying me to spread misinformation or lie or do strange things, or that I secretly developed this game, and that so many strange, crazy things that I'm just entirely tired of dealing with and want no more. So I probably will never address, speak about, or have anything to do with skill-based matchmaking ever again, regardless of what happens. And if somebody else wants to, they are more than welcome to pick up the mantle and go do their own studies. Guys, that is all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out. If you want all the weapon stats for World War II in your pocket to go, then look no further than the Ultimate Utility app by Brass Monkey. It's available on iOS and Android. There are links in the description, or you can just search for it in the App Store.